I need the scoop.
A woman's Christmas gift. Revenge exposes her in-laws' illegal rental scheme and triggers a legal battle worth thousands. This Reddit saga proves that sometimes the best payback comes from simply telling the truth. Get ready for a divorce story where karma delivers justice through prenups, lawsuits, and one very satisfying settlement.
I'm using a throwaway account for anonymity. I'm a 31-year-old woman, and I married my soon-to-be ex-husband, who's 33, in 2018. My in-laws never liked me and made it clear from the start. My soon-to-be ex insisted that they were just putting up a tough exterior and they'd grow to love me. To show you how evil they are, one time I joined them for dinner and brought a cake I'd made, because I was always raised to be a gracious guest. When I stepped into the kitchen and offered the cake to his mother as a thank you for inviting me, she took the plate over to the garbage bin, dumped it in, and handed me the plate back. When I told my husband what she did, he confronted her, and all of a sudden the crocodile tears started. She claimed she grabbed the plate but didn't get a good grip. I let go too quickly, and it fell to the floor, so of course it had to be thrown away. My sister-in-law confirmed that was what happened. My soon-to-be ex owned his own business, and they called me a gold digger behind his back. Of course they insisted on a prenup, which I didn't care about because I never thought my marriage would end, and it would appease them and maybe allow them to finally treat me kindly. Nope. His business failed once COVID hit. We went through his savings and my own trying to keep it afloat. I refused to go into debt to keep it going, so he closed it down. In 2022, he was suffering from really bad depression because he lost his business and couldn't find new work. He suggested we move to his hometown, closer to his family, so he had a larger support network. Against my best judgment, we did. He wanted to only work part-time while he tried to restart his business, so I became the main breadwinner. He only worked 12 hours a week at Walmart, so he could do non-existent work restarting his business. I make just over 6 figures, and I can't believe I didn't realize years ago I was the family ATM. And as with most wives, I became the person in charge of buying gifts. Stupid old me thought buying them thoughtful, expensive gifts would finally make them see I wanted to be accepted by them. Gifts to us were a couple's gift, but clearly for my soon-to-be ex only. Every holiday was spent with them, monthly dinners with the whole family. After a year, I realized that if I ever tried to talk or join a conversation, everyone would go quiet, so I just stopped talking when I visited. In early December, they finalized plans for Christmas. A few days later, my soon-to-be ex said his family decided they didn't want me to join them for Christmas Eve dinner and Christmas lunch because I ruined the family vibe. I replied, "Fine, we'll do our own thing instead." My soon-to-be ex sheepishly looked away and said he was still going to go. I was livid and so disappointed in him. That was the moment I knew my marriage was over. So I returned the presents I had bought for his family. In their place, I got 1 pair of novelty business socks for my father-in-law, a supermarket brand bottle of shampoo for my mother-in-law, the nastiest perfume I could find at the dollar store for my sister-in-law. The most expensive gift was a large rawhide bone for my brother-in-law and his wife's chihuahua, too big for it to get its jaw around, rendering it useless. I saved about $600 to put on a deposit for a new apartment. My husband came home from Christmas lunch telling me I humiliated him and embarrassed him in front of his family. I asked him, why would he think I'd buy nice gifts for people who clearly don't like me and don't want me around? I served divorce papers last week. Remember how he was supposed to be a millionaire by now, so we had that prenup? My soon-to-be ex is not eligible for any of my savings. It was required to keep separate accounts, or alimony. My lawyer even laughed that the prenup that was set up for him is going to be what we use for me. It required both spouses to maintain separate bank accounts, and each spouse could keep 100% of their savings. No spouse eligible for alimony. He doesn't have money for rent and auto insurance. Not my problem anymore. Some of my friends and family are on my side and proud that I went out in a blaze of glory. Others are telling me I was being way too petty, which isn't really like me. So, am I in the wrong? The first thing I did after I moved into my new apartment was adopt an older cat from the shelter. He was allergic, and I could never adopt one since we first started living together. We're just 2 old hags living our best lives after being rejected.
Reddit users rallied behind the poster with overwhelming support, praising her strategic gift choices and encouraging her divorce decision. Armed with a prenup that ironically protected her assets instead of her husband's, she moved into her new apartment with her adopted cat. Just days after the divorce papers were served, a desperate phone call would reveal how quickly her ex-husband's situation had deteriorated.
Many thanks to everyone for their support in my last post. I thought I'd send a small update. First, for those who asked how the deposit on my new apartment was only the $600 I saved on the gifts, it certainly wasn't. I had to dip into savings, but that $600 helped. My soon-to-be ex-husband didn't bother reaching out to me after I left until he was served the divorce papers, and my lawyer made it clear we're exercising the prenup. Then it was loving voicemails and texts I never picked up from him and his family for a few days trying to convince me to come back, which eventually turned to threatening and cruel voicemails and texts when it was clear I wasn't budging. My lawyer suggested I don't block them, so we have evidence of harassment if needed. Basically, give them the rope to hang themselves with. But then, last night I got call after call from my soon-to-be ex-husband. Stupidly, I picked it up thinking there was some kind of emergency or something. I barely got hello out when he said, "The rent is a week late." I told him that's strange because I paid my landlord 6 days ago. He paused and sighed dramatically and replied, "No, the rent for here." I reminded him I don't live there and he shouldn't expect rent. Cue his parents both texting me that they're going to sue me to pay the remainder of the lease entirely. I'm not worried about having an eviction on my record, since the apartment is in his parents' names. When we first announced we were moving to his hometown, they rented an apartment for us right away so we could move right in. They've been renewing the lease each year. We had to pay his parents, and then they write a check to the landlord, who has no idea who my soon-to-be ex-husband and I are, let alone that we lived there. Red flag, I know. I'm glad I had a few weeks to prep my leaving since they'd probably use the fact that it's their apartment to kick me out immediately. My lawyer is confident they have no leg to stand on. I haven't signed any type of lease and utilities are in their name too, because they were afraid of having too many names connected to the apartment and the landlord finding out. So they are on the hook for everything that doesn't get paid. But hey, that was their choice and their scheming. Find out and find out, as they say. Divorce is probably going to be a bumpy ride with this man-child and his psycho parents. Any advice from anyone who's been through it is welcome.
The community celebrated her lawyer's confidence while warning about potential escalation from the vindictive in-laws. As threats turned to legal intimidation, the poster's attorney began investigating the rental arrangement more closely. What started as a simple demand for rent money would soon uncover a web of deception that put the in-laws in serious legal jeopardy.
Hi, if this isn't the right place to post any updates, please direct me to a subreddit that better fits. Super sorry if I'm annoying members who aren't interested, but a few requested an update. First post, my husband's family uninvited me from Christmas. Husband still left and made me celebrate Christmas alone. I organised gifts as a final bird flip. First update, I moved out, and my underemployed soon-to-be ex-husband and his family still expected me to pay rent on the apartment in my in-laws' names. So, the people who commented that my soon-to-be former in-laws were probably charging my soon-to-be ex-husband and me more than the amount on the lease, you called it. And we wouldn't have found out if they weren't so entitled and determined to hurt me. They got a cousin who happens to be a lawyer to send me a letter demanding I pay the entirety of the remainder of the lease, or they will file suit and force me to pay it. Clearly, a scare tactic. So, my lawyer sent a formal request to their lawyer for a copy of the lease, which I've never seen, and a copy of their written agreement with us as sublessees, which doesn't exist. They sent the lease and insisted the sublease agreement was a verbal contract. Not only is subleasing explicitly prohibited, but my mother-in-law and father-in-law had been charging us an extra $200 each month. So, we've notified the landlord that I've been living there with my soon-to-be ex-husband, and the leases were living in their own house throughout the duration of the lease, and sent copies of my driver's license with the address and over 2 years of bank and credit card statements with the address listed. They were served with a 30-day eviction yesterday, which I know about because my mother-in-law left a voicemail about me kicking my soon-to-be ex-husband out of his home, and that she now drives with a baseball bat in her car and she'll be keeping an eye out for me. Absolutely. I'm keeping their calls and text messages as evidence for a protective order. She's going to regret it because she works for the school district and a restraining order won't let her teach. Obviously, my lawyer's expertise is family law, and this was out of her purview, so she referred me to a colleague who focuses on real estate law. We met today to devise a battle plan, and I am now suing my mother-in-law and father-in-law for all the money I can prove I transferred for rent for the entirety of the residency there, since the apartment was technically not a legal apartment to rent since they couldn't sublease. No clean hands to rent to us, and then sue me. He's not sure how a judge will buy it, and it's way beyond my state's civil compensation limit, but he's confident that it will scare them and leave them open to settling for just returning the additional $200 from each payment. Which I think is fair, because I did live there with my soon-to-be ex-husband, so I don't think it's right to get all the rent money back. I'm an adult, and adults pay rent, and I don't want them to have the satisfaction of saying I'm using the divorce as a windfall. I had never thought of investigating suing for return of money invested in his business. It was a premarital asset and exempt from prenup. I'll bring it up when I meet with my lawyer next. On the soon-to-be ex-husband front, there's no news there. We will likely need to go to family court for a separation order, since he won't agree to the financial details of the separation agreement my lawyer has drafted. My state requires a 1-year separation period before a divorce can be finalized, so this is going to be a long process. A few people asked why he did what he did, and if he's offered any kind of explanation or justification. We haven't really talked since he was served. I don't know if he just fell out of love, but I was still financially convenient, or if the mask finally lifted, or if it was being so close to his family and them having opportunities to manipulate him. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't need closure. I need them all gone. Looking back, making promises during couples counseling and slowly regressing back is enough closure. Knowing he allowed his family to treat me like crap for so long is closure. That final betrayal at Christmas is closure. My focus isn't on figuring it out, it's making sure I'm happy.
Readers were amazed at how the in-laws' greed had backfired so spectacularly, with many noting the poetic justice of their illegal scheme being exposed. With settlement money in hand and harassment finally stopped, the poster focused on rebuilding her life. 3 months later, she would share news that proves sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.
Hi everyone. I posted here a few months ago and everyone was super supportive. Thank you. I thought I'd send through an update and it's actually a positive one. Summary of previous events that is the clownery of my life. My ex's family treated me like crap for years. In my naivety, I told myself to just try harder. They uninvited me to Christmas for always ruining the family vibe. My ex decided to celebrate with family because his wife isn't family, and left me to celebrate Christmas alone. I decided to return their expensive, thoughtful presents with cheap, crappy ones as a final screw you, moved out, and filed for divorce. My ex can't afford the rent on the old apartment alone. The apartment is actually leased to his parents, and they demanded I pay the remainder of the rent, or they'll sue. My lawyer and I sue them. Turns out the sublease was illegal. They charged us, really me, since my ex was a deadbeat, $200 extra per month that they pocketed. We notify the real landlord. My ex got an eviction notice. So I had our first, and it turns out only, mediation meeting with the in-laws about the excess rent they were charging me and my ex a few weeks ago. The in-laws tried to claim they charged us extra for their role as property managers of the apartment. They couldn't explain in any way what they did as property managers to justify a fee of $200 a month, other than chatting with their son about the apartment several times a month. In other words, charging us to talk to their own son. Then it came to the sublease being a verbal contract, since we never signed anything, and my lawyer asked on which date I verbally agreed. I never did, actually, since my ex handled all of those conversations with his parents prior to our move. They said they couldn't remember, but since I moved in, I obviously agreed to the arrangement they made for my ex. My lawyer told them that it sounds like any verbal contract was with their son, and given the terms were oral and unclear, they will be too difficult and costly for them to enforce. He added, all of that is a moot point, since they didn't have the authority to sublease anyway, and their case wouldn't get more than the 30 seconds it would take for the judge to dismiss it. He then told them that we'd be pursuing the lawsuit unless they settled on returning $6,200 and will give them time to discuss the deal with their lawyer. I was suing for the return of the excess, not full rent since I lived in the apartment. Within an hour, their lawyer called mine to agree to a settlement of $5,400, since technically the little bit my ex paid for rent should have a proportionate amount applied to some of that excess. We agreed to it. My divorce lawyer also sent them a cease and desist letter about the harassment, warning them that if it continues, I will file for a restraining order, and I have plenty of evidence to have it granted. A lot of people asked why I haven't done this already, but I'd rather not go nuclear unless I have to. My mother-in-law's job would very likely be affected if she has a restraining order, and she will just go scorched earth even harder. Thankfully, this seems to have been enough of a wake-up call for her in particular, and the texts, emails, and voicemails have stopped entirely. I also learned from mutual friends that my ex was already on dating apps a few weeks after I left, but apparently nothing goes beyond a first date. I guess women don't want to get involved with a 33-year-old unemployed entrepreneur who lives with and lives off his parents and is still chasing some elusive business he hasn't been able to start up. Laughing out loud. All communication with him has been through my lawyer, except for 2 incidents. A few weeks ago, he called me at 3 a.m, completely drunk, leaving a voicemail asking to fix things. He called the next day to apologize for that. I guess this will likely be my final update. Now I just have to wait for the divorce to be finalized and done. There is a huge weight off my shoulders. The past 5 months have been like whiplash, and it's such a relief to finally feel settled. I always knew that about his family, but stupidly thought he was some magical exception. I've been trying to be kind to myself when I blame myself for not seeing it sooner and leaving earlier.
Sometimes standing up for yourself opens doors you never expected, both legally and personally. This poster's journey from doormat to victor shows that self-respect often comes with unexpected rewards. Share your thoughts on family boundaries and financial justice in the comments. Subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be taken advantage of. And check out our other videos celebrating those who chose their dignity over keeping the peace.